everyone, and welcome to Talk of the Town. I'm James Milan, and I am here today in front of our newest piece of green technology in town with Assistant Town Manager Jim Feeney, who is going to explain what it is that we are standing in front of and all the use that we hope is going to be made of this new technology. So Jim, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, James.
So why don't you explain to the audience what it is that we're looking at here?
So today we are here in the Russell Common lot in Arlington Center with our newest electric vehicle charging station, or more formally known as electric vehicle supply equipment. As you'll see, this is a charging station produced by ChargePoint, which is a large open electric vehicle network that is application-based, meaning you can get a mobile application on your phone or an access card that will allow you to use a ChargePoint station anywhere in the nation. And I believe there are over 38,000 charging points that are currently part of this network, including ones at Whole Foods here in Arlington, as well as the MBTA station at Alewife.
So are those the only ways to use the station? In fact, do you need an app or a card, you said?
Yes, either a ChargePoint access card, you can download their free mobile app, or there are other functions for using your smartphone if you have touch to pay. As you can see, there is a wireless reader here in the device.
Okay, so just tell us a little bit how will it work?
Sure, so obviously someone will need to have an EV, electric vehicle, that will take a plug-in. This is called a J1772 connector. It's the most common connector available for electric vehicles. So someone could actually use their mobile app. It shows up on a map, which is populated with all of the charging stations. So you could zoom over the Russell Common lot, select this station, and see if either one of these ports are available. As you'll see, this is a dual head, so we can charge two vehicles at once, and it'll let you know if either of the ports is available, so that you know before getting here whether or not you're going to be able to use this particular amenity.
So you can be out in your electric vehicle and realize, oh, I'd love to get a charge, and then be able to check and see whether something is available here, and that's because it takes a while, I assume. If it is occupied, it's likely to be occupied for a while. It's not the same thing, obviously, as going into a gas station and pumping gas.
Yeah, you know, someone could come just while they're running an errand. They could use the map to see that it's available, and, you know, I need to go down to Arlington Center to go to the pharmacy or the convenience store, and okay, it's free right now, why don't I do it now? And that person may only charge for upwards of a half hour, but I'm sure there are instances too where people are going to be parked while they're conducting, you know, more business in town, and maybe charge for an hour or even more.
Mm-hmm. So a full charge right up to the max, do you have a sense of how long that takes for an average electric vehicle?
So that would vary by vehicle depending on the size of the onboard charger. So an all-electric vehicle usually has a 6.6 kilowatt per hour charging capacity, whereas a hybrid vehicle, like the one we have with us here today, would maybe have a smaller charger, such as a 3.3 kilowatt hour charger. Mm-hmm. So if someone comes on average and uses this, is called a level 2 charging station, it's likely they're going to get somewhere between 12 and 24 miles of additional range per hour of charging. You know, okay. Each end of the range being either a 3.3 kilowatt hour charger or a 6.6 kilowatt hour charger.
Right. And I note that that you've got a couple of some of the prime parking real estate here in Arlington Center. We're just behind the Jefferson Cutter House, really as close to access to Mass Ave and the shops and restaurants that are all around us. How did you guys designate these particular two spots for this?
So while that was certainly an added benefit to get, you know, two prime parking spots in the lot nearest the business district, to be honest, it was actually dictated by where we would be getting the power to supply this equipment. And that happens to be the Jefferson Cutter House, where we have existing electric meters and power panels with enough, with sufficient capacity, as well as the right size breakers so that we can protect the circuitry in this equipment.
Okay, so it's just like kind of serendipitous also that it is going to be rewarding people in another way for moving to EV technology by also giving them the prime parking spots in the lot. So you were mentioning that we have a vehicle here already, and it is a hybrid vehicle. Just tell us a little bit about the provenance of that vehicle, because I think that's going to help us to talk a little bit more about what your expectations and hopes are for this station. So who owns this vehicle?
So James, today we have a hybrid plug-in Prius that is actually driven by Arlington's Town Manager Adam Chapdelaine. And as you alluded to, we've been making many steps over the years to move our fleet in a more green direction and investing in fuel-efficient vehicles. We do have some all-electric plug-in vehicles, and we still do have many hybrids. So I brought the Town Manager's vehicle here today. Now that we've activated the charging station, I was hoping to do a demonstration.
Please do.
So it's the first time I've done it, so I've downloaded the mobile application for ChargePoint through my app store. And I would find the charging station on the map. I would select it, and I'm going to hit Start Charge. We'll have unlocked the charging station. Otherwise, these ports would remain locked in here. And my phone tells me it's now okay for me to plug in, and it'll monitor my energy usage. So I'm going to put that back in my pocket and extend the cord to the back of the vehicle. And now back here at the charging station, we're going to see the energy monitor and what the cost for my charging session will be.
And what is there such a thing as an average cost for the charging session?
Obviously, that is going to depend on length. But what we have here set up as what we call a pricing policy is, as you know, here in the Russell Common lot, we charge 50 cents per hour as your standard parking fee. That fee is still going to apply in the electric vehicle parking spots. So this machine is going to calculate, based on the amount of time you're here, a rate for parking based at 50 cents per hour. In addition, it's going to monitor how much electricity is being consumed by the vehicle per kilowatt hour, and there's an energy fee factored in based on our electricity costs for both supply and delivery, so that the town recoups the cost of the electricity that gets transferred to the vehicle, which is approximately between 25 and 30 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay, so that demonstration illustrates that it's a fairly simple process. You just you downloaded the app, you started it up. Matter of 30 seconds later, you have the hose or the cable hooked up to the car, and then it's just a question of, like, at this point, somebody could walk away, do some errands, come back at whatever point they choose, and there they've had a nice parking spot and a much more charged car when they return.
Sure.
That's great. So tell us, that kind of covers the procedure about how it is that people will access and use this. Let's talk a little bit about what your hopes and expectations, town policymakers, are for the introduction of this, because as we were talking before, you had mentioned that this is the first installation of an EV charging station in a municipal parking lot here in Arlington. Is this an experiment, or is this just the first step of what you know is going to be continued dissemination of these charging stations, and it's just not quite clear exactly where and when those will happen?
That's a great point, James. I think it's a combination of both. I think we knew that many of our residents were switching over to electric vehicles, but we ourselves in our fleet are switching over for electric vehicles. So we knew that we needed to start expanding our charging infrastructure. And as you mentioned, this is the first charging station we've put in a public lot. And what that allows us to do is an employee that's commuting from home in their own electric vehicle, this would be available to them to charge. A town employee driving an electric fleet vehicle, this would be available for them to charge, such as one of the Arlington Police Department's parking enforcement officers driving their new smart car could actually park in one of these spots, and the town could provide that vehicle an access card so they could charge for free and top off while they're patrolling the lot before moving on to another parking district in town. Of course, it's available to visitors and employees of, most likely the center businesses, but even a nearby resident that may not have access to a charging station because they live in a larger apartment building or in rental housing would also have access to this charging station. So it made sense to put it in the public lot because then it could be opened up to use, by many different people. And what's interesting about this piece of equipment is you notice, it's application-based, so it's a smart system. We have a dashboard software installed on our computers back at Town Hall that's going to be able to tell us when the station's being used, on average how long it's being used, how many unique drivers are using it, what our electricity costs have been, so it captures a significant amount of data that will really help us to understand what the demand for this infrastructure is going to be, and maybe how rapidly we want to deploy this elsewhere in town, or really how many units we might need. So we're going to be able to monitor that going forward. But it also helps us support increasing our own electric vehicle fleet, because we're going to have more places for those personnel to charge as they conduct their business across town.
Right. So you've mentioned a couple of times your electric vehicle fleet.
Yep.
How large is that fleet currently, and what do you expect? How do you expect that expansion to work?
So right now, I believe we're at 3 plug-in electric vehicles. We have a significant amount of hybrid vehicles that were purchased back when that was the dominant technology, but I understand we also have a few more electric vehicles on the way, and our intention will be to continue when we phase out older vehicles to switch over
to replace them
with
plug-in vehicles as that makes sense.
And this will assist us because we have more infrastructure to be able to support those vehicles.
So this is clearly going to be a data goldmine for you, and help you to, as you said, make decisions about when and where to continue to expand the installation of these charging stations. Does that mean then that this is in some way, I had a very fundamental question about whether, from what you can tell in terms of electric vehicle usage in Arlington currently, and I don't know how easy or hard it is to make any kind of assessment about that, but from what you can tell, is this more let us build it and they will come? Or is it that there's a recognized demand already that you perhaps have been hearing about because you're on the other end of that phone if people are calling in about these kinds of things? Is this something that's being spurred by public demand, or is it too early for that to be the case with this technology?
Probably a little bit of both, James. I mean, at least anecdotally, yes. There are people that are asking for more charging points locally, and I think that's, can be seen by the fact that Whole Foods went ahead and put one in. The MBTA has purchased stations and put them in, in some of their public points. So I think that's indicative of the fact that people understand electric vehicles are becoming more popular, especially in this county. So not only are we purchasing them, but we understand that our residents are too. Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting is, and I didn't mention this before, the Commonwealth's Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs actually provided us a grant that covered 50% of the cost of this charging station through what they call their Mass EVIP, or Electric Vehicle Incentive Program, which incentivizes not only private entities but public entities to continue moving in this direction and keep Massachusetts on the forefront of this green technology.
So I want to make sure I understood what you just said correctly. The state chipped in 50% of the cost of installing this station?
They chipped in 50% of the cost of the charging station itself. So we covered, as a town, the other 50% of the charging station, and then the installation costs.
And what kind of money are we talking about? I have no idea what a charging station
So
would
this
cost.
particular piece of equipment, the 50% grant amounted to $3,105.
Okay. As we hopefully move in the direction that we expect here in Arlington and in Middlesex County and beyond, do you imagine that it's going to be the government, local government's commitment to its own fleet that is going to outpace the consumer side, or what do you think?
You know, I'm not sure I know exactly how it'll
Sure.
play it out in the end, but my research from some other states, especially California, you know, once there is some local government buy-in and investment, it seems that shortly thereafter, private businesses, especially in retail districts, will start to buy in at that point. And as well as private businesses that may have large workforces and just want to provide it in their parking lot to support their employees.
Yeah, because the reason I ask is because it seems to me that that on a local level, the government, you know, is a source of fleets of vehicles, so that it would make sense to make sure the infrastructure works for those fleets. Whereas it's much harder to control or to service people's individual decisions as individuals or families to purchase electric vehicles. So that building out of the infrastructure, it seems to me, is the key, both locally, statewide, and nationally. And how that happens is intriguing to me, because if you're just thinking about people as consumers, then somebody's got to make a big capital investment, right, to provide that infrastructure before people are willing to deal with the relative inconvenience of owning an electric vehicle and dealing with keeping it charged, et cetera.
Yeah.
So that there's almost, to me, a natural role that the government would play in terms of showing that this is a viable thing, and then also in terms of just getting the infrastructure set up for others to make a smooth transition.
Yeah, and I think the more charging stations and charging points that are available, you know, not only to our staff but to the public, will certainly, like you say, you know, help reduce range anxiety. You know, a lot of people only have the ability to charge at home now and may limit the amount of time they spend behind the wheel or when they may run certain errands. But, you know, if this becomes more normalized, where you have access to charging points everywhere, as you have access to gas stations, you know, it may become something that folks don't even have to think about anymore or have to be anxious about.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering also about something else. You had mentioned that there are 3 fully electric vehicles now in the fleet and anticipated more. I know that 2 of those 3, or at least a couple that we are awaiting here in town, come from the Green Grants program that we recently spoke to Town Manager Adam Chapdelaine about. Just wondering, I have the same question for you as I posed to him that day, and that is, as far as you can tell, where does Arlington fit in terms of being in the vanguard, in the mainstream, et cetera, in this particular move towards integrating electric vehicle technology into our local lives?
Oh, I would certainly say that we're one of, you know, the few early adopters. You know, this technology is certainly it's out there, and many communities have adopted it and may have adopted some of the sort of first generation stuff that may not have been smart equipment that helps track usage, but, you know, served a purpose as essentially a place to plug in. But I think that you know, along with some of our neighbors and surrounding communities, we are on the forefront of, you know, this emerging technology.
Yeah, and then that seems of a piece with so much else about our town that really is pushing in the direction of more sustainable practices and procedures and equipment at all points that we can.
It's truly a commitment that's been made.
I'm just want to invite you there to, if there's anything that we haven't covered that you want to make sure that people know, either about this specific charging station, about the plans for the future, or anything else in this general topic area.
So I know we talked about, maybe we don't have specific numbers about how many Arlington residents possess electric vehicles, but I did have a funny story I wanted to share. When we were down here completing this installation at the end of last week, which involved painting the green lines in the parking spots, and we were getting the signs in on the same day, we went over to the Jefferson Cutter House to power on the unit. And not 5 minutes later, before coming out and placing our traffic cones at the end of the spots, an EV user had already located the charging station on the ChargePoint app, pulled into a parking spot, and plugged in to start charging. So that told me that there probably is going to be a pretty good demand for these 2 parking spots initially.
All right, well, we want to thank you for taking this time, as always, to explain this. I'm sure that we will be back talking to you in the not too distant future just to see how things are playing out over the next number of months and what future plans will be. So appreciate the time.
Excellent.
Thanks very much, Jim.
Thank you.
For Assistant Manager Jim Feeney, and in front of the newest EV charge point here in Arlington, I'm James Milan for Talk of the Town. Thanks for joining us.